Hey everybody, this is the How They Did It podcast. I'm really sorry that I haven't brought in any episodes. Shit's been really crazy. First things first, before I get into the episode, I want to dedicate this episode to Daniele Doretto, who's in the hospital right now. He's a boxer from the Fifth Street Gym. Uh, he had a subdermal hematoma in his brain, and he had brain surgery. We're waiting to hear some news soon. So if anyone's out there, please send your prayers for him. He's a great guy, and we're hoping the best. Move on here. I got Devin. He's a good friend of mine. He actually is a great friend of my wife's, and she introduced me to him, and we met for dinner one night. He was telling about his Mezcal company. He said his Mezcal company. He's worked with breweries. He's owned breweries. He's owned Airbnbs. It was such an amazing story. I felt like he's one of the guests I really wanted to bring on the podcast. So, man, I really appreciate you coming here. I appreciate you taking your time out. I'm sorry. I know it's been crazy, and I've been moving you around and changing the date, so I really appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, my man. So, okay, listen, to start off, why don't you give me a little bit of your history and what you're doing now? Because you're also, I know you're in law school, and there's so much to cover. I think you'll do a better job than me.
Yeah, for sure. So, my name is Devin T Adams. I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. I went to college at West Point, the military academy. I studied economics and systems engineering there. And then I went on to have a career in the Army for about 8 years, almost a decade. I was on active duty in the Army. I was an airborne ranger, so I jumped out of planes and did a lot of kind of direct action stuff. Deployed to Afghanistan in 2012, spent some time in Europe right around the time that Russia invaded Crimea the first time. That's how I met Britt. I was living in Italy at the time for 2 years. And then, I got out of the military in 2018. I started my first business. My first business was a company called B and Beans, which was basically like a short-term rental property management company. I had like 10 apartments here in New York City, all over uptown, sprinkled about. And that's kind of how I started. That was like my first business, right? And one of the things I learned from that business was we did pretty well. We did about $800,000 in revenue in our first year. But there's a difference, I think, between making money and running a business. And at that time, I was really making money, but I don't know that we were a very sophisticated business operation. And in conjunction with that, the regulations around short-term rentals started to change in New York City. And so with those two things in mind, I went to law school in 2019. I went to Vanderbilt University Law School, which was a great opportunity down in Nashville. It was crazy, though, because my law school career was impacted by the pandemic, of course. So I was like 2 months into my second semester of law school when the world shut down. So I ended up moving back to New York City. And from there, obviously the Airbnb business was no more in the pandemic, right? I was actually working I got a legal internship at Airbnb corporate that summer, but we ended up turning it into a year-long internship for the year. But it was in that summer that I basically took all the gains and all the knowledge that I had from that first business and really started thinking about how I was going to apply it to the next business and what I wanted to do next. And so from there, I created my company, which is called War Bevco. War Bevco stands for What's a Roadblock Beverage Company. And it really was started with the idea that a lot of entrepreneurs out there have a lot of ideas and want to, start businesses and things, but there's all these things that they make up in their mind that create roadblocks for them in front of them. And I really just wanted to take that head on and say, for my own life,
So,
I had done.
one pause, 1 second. We have a fire alarm going on. What's the chances? What's the chances?
That's crazy.
Jesus Christ. It's all right.
Are you
We're
okay?
back. I'll edit it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I was a Roadblock Beverage Company. I had been sitting in my parents' garage in Alabama one day, having a pity party about how we had just opened up this new brewery, and I was like, man, I'd love to have my own brand, but like, who's gonna invest? Like, do I know people who have money and all this other stuff? And in the middle of that, I just was like, bro, like, what are you talking about? Like, you haven't even started doing anything yet. You haven't like put together a plan. You haven't done anything. So let's put together the stuff first, and then let's see where we are then. So the idea behind War Bevco is it is a beverage alcohol conglomerate. We have several brands, and throughout the lifetime of the business, we will continue to build brands and hopefully sell brands to other beverage companies like Pernod Ricard, Diageo, some of these larger companies. And so right now we're in the brand building phase. We have 2 Mezcal brands coming to market. One's called Mala Mia, which is a luxury premium Mezcal brand, and then we have another brand called Cialoso, which is more of a standard Mezcal, like a $42 kind of bottle situation. And so that's where I'm at right now, and just 2 years deep through the War Bevco cycle. It's been a very interesting journey. It's been a lot harder than I thought it was going to be in the beginning, but so that's kind of the general story of where we're at right now.
It's funny that so far almost every entrepreneur I've had the pleasure of interviewing here has a similar, that phrase is so similar. It comes up every time, It's a lot harder than I originally expected it to be. Like, that seems to be like a common theme among what I hear.
Yeah. It's because, I think that, and I have a pretty good framework. I think, first of all, the most important thing that I can tell you is that what gave me the motivation to start this company and to keep going was simply, especially the Mezcal brand, I knew at the beginning that I had no idea what I was doing, that I had no experience in this realm. I had no experience in importing beverages, any of this stuff. But what I knew about it was that there were other people who had Mezcal brands on the shelf. And so the pathway to the shelves was one that existed, and that I just had to find and chart my pathway through that through that journey to get to that shelf. And that's what I equip myself with as an idea from the very beginning to that's where I gleaned motivation from, was hey, I don't know, but I know that there is a way. So the fact that I don't know doesn't mean we're not going. It just means that I need to figure it out. So I need to go ask someone. I need to go read a book. I need to go look on the internet. I need to think about it hard. But the idea that there isn't a pathway to the shelf is not real, right? Yeah. So that's but because that's my attitude about it, I discovered along the pathway that damn, this pathway is crazy, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
This road is I thought it was going to be a 5-mile road, and it's that was 400 miles.
Yeah, it's an ultra. It's an ultra marathon.
That's right. So the pathway does exist, right? But I just didn't. I didn't have a real concept or real understanding of quite how long that road and pathway would be. So both things are true. There is a pathway, so there's no reason to ever despair, right? But if you don't know how long the pathway is going to be. But I don't think it matters. You just have to be committed at the beginning to say hey man, however long this road takes and wherever we're going, I'm going to do all the stuff that we need to do to continue to make sure that we get there, that we get to our place. And so something I'll talk about later was one of my biggest advice to entrepreneurs is hey, you got to define your outcome at the beginning. You need to define your outcome at the beginning, where are we going and what are we doing, because the road is long and dark. And if you don't know where you're going, you're going to quit before you get there, because you don't know where you're going. So you're just going to be on this lonely road, walking every day, but you don't know where you're going. And of course that's going to be, unmotivating. That's going to feel like you're a failure, all that stuff, because you're not giving yourself the checkpoints along the road to make sure that you're doing okay.
That's a super important point. And it's another thing that I've realized, even with my businesses before, I've struggled whenever I've started something and I didn't have a clear idea of why I was doing what I was doing. As soon as things started coming up, I'd be like, okay, well, this is a problem, mistake, I made a mistake here. I overcommitted, shit, maybe I can get out of this. What am I going to do? So I could definitely see that. But before I get deeper into the Mezcal company and that, because you took a very different role. Most people see the liquor industry and they're like, yeah, we're not going anywhere near that, especially an individual entrepreneur. But you end up doing it. Before you tackle that, can you give me a little history lesson of when you started your Airbnb business? How did that start? How did you get your money to do your first one? How did you build it up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So For the first business, I first was working as an admissions officer at West Point, which is like an hour north of New York City, and I wasn't using my apartment a lot, and I needed some money, and a friend of mine that I used to carpool to work with was basically like, hey man, like why don't you put like one of your rooms in your house on like Airbnb, because you have a 2-bedroom, you don't have a roommate, or why don't you put the whole thing while you're traveling sometime? And I was like, I never even thought about that. Right? So I was like, okay, well, like, let me look into that. So I looked into it and kind of looked into, like, okay, what are the things that I would need? So at first I started, like, super simple. I had, like, a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom in East Harlem on 122nd between 2nd and 3rd, which is not, like, a glamorous neighborhood. It's right across from the projects. It's, like, but it's chill, though. It's a nice apartment. So I looked on Airbnb around at, like, what were the kind of comps, I guess, like in my neighborhood, how much were places going for, what did I need to have, and I got like a lockbox and some other stuff, and just started super simple like that, right? Just like super simple, this is how it works, and I had my first kind of clients, and whenever I would be traveling for work, they would rent my apartment. So that went pretty well, right? So my apartment rent was like $2,200. So from renting it out for a couple weekends or while I was gone for work, I was making like $6,000 a month. I'm like, well, shit, that's like 3 times like my rent. And, you know, of course it costs money to do, so you've got to like factor in cleaning and other stuff. So let's say $2,200 apartment plus cleaning plus like laundry and everything, probably it was $3,400, let's say, in like costs, right? But it's and this is something that is important. It's my place, though, right? So I always kind of never really counted rent, because I'm like, but I mean, that's a cost that I'm already paying. And so this is, you know what I mean? So, like, the $6,000 really is, like, all profit, basically, because I was already doing this before anyway, and I thought nothing about it, right? So that's how I started to get the first money, was like, okay, so I'm making, you know, $4,000, or as I said, maybe I'm making $6,000 from my perspective a month on the apartment. So I started to look at it, and I was like, well, I mean, dang, like I could probably get some more apartments, maybe get a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, blah, blah, look at different configurations in different neighborhoods to figure out what's going to give us the most amount of money. So the first thing that I did was I went and recruited a friend first. I went and recruited a friend. I was like, look, man, this is like my last 6 months in my apartment. I can manage your apartment, and this is the deal. I'll give you your money back for like the rent plus 10% of the overage is what you make, and then we make the rest of the money. So if you give that same example, we make, let's say, $6,000, right? Automatically, I give my friend back their $2,200, right? Plus 10% of the overage. So the overage in this case is $3,800, right? So we get $3,800 after we pay them their rent. So then we would give them $380. So they would get $2,580. And then the company would keep the rest. So then the company keeps around $3,500. So to grow, what I did was, first I got like my friends. So then we were making like $3,500 for a couple of months. And I took all that money, and then I went and got another apartment. A new apartment, new configuration. So I paid the deposit, I paid the whatchamacallit. But the whole thing was like, at first I used like other people a lot. Like I would like enlist other people because it was easier. But then as time went along, I expanded it to where like the company would just like go to the landlords and get like just go get an agreement with them and say, hey, we have all these other apartments that we're managing. Like we don't have any problems. We're doing it well, and we'll give you like 5% over what you're asking for rent. So we would offer them more money than they were asking on the open market for the apartment to get them to agree to let us Airbnb the apartment. So I did all that, like, I didn't take outside money or anything. I used all the money, all revenue from the different apartments to then grow. So I would like, okay, it's going to cost, you know, $15,000 for a new apartment between the deposit, the first month's rent, and to furnish it. So I would get an apartment, then I would take the first $15,000 worth of profit and immediately go get another apartment. And then we rinse and repeat until I got more. And then I messed around with the different configurations. I had like 3 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, 3 2-bedrooms, 2 2 2-bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2 1-bedrooms, and a studio. The 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms were the money makers. If I went back into the business, I would only do those. But then I also had some that we ran by the room. where we had a place in Harlem where it was like, instead of renting out the whole apartment,
just got the room.
we rented out by the rooms. It was like a hostel basically, which was very interesting. And of course, by the end though, they made all this, like, all the way that we were doing this, ended up being like, I don't want to call it illegal, but I would say that it's now regulated in a different manner. And that's part of the reason that law school is really helpful for me as an entrepreneur, because I was just like, man, I just was making a lot of money in this business, and then I kind of got blindsided by legal regulatory stuff. So I wanted to go and get good at understanding how to, like, read the industry and understand what's going on around me, which is how I ended up in the alcohol business, right? Because the alcohol business is a highly regulated business. So from the legal perspective, my expertise is in cannabis, alcohol, and short-term rentals, which is like the Airbnb stuff. So I worked for Airbnb Corporate. I worked for the National Cannabis Roundtable, which is like a huge lobbying firm for federal legalization. And so I found that these highly regulated areas, the barriers to entry are really high. You need money, blah, blah. But you really just need a plan and an understanding of what's going on and a willingness to, like, sit there and do the work until you get to the point where it's going to be, like, worth it for you. You know, I've been working on the alcohol business for 2 years. For the brewery, we're about to open up a second location in Atlanta next month. For the Mezcal, we're going to market this month. But it's been a long road. It's been 2 years. I thought I was going to get to market in 6 months. It's been 2 years. And so, you know, that's 18 months difference in expectation. That's a lot of days different than how you thought it was going to be. But I have to be always humble that my thoughts are, like, don't govern very much but my actions, you know? So I can't be surprised that, you know, whatever I thought isn't, like, how the real world is, because I only control so little of the real world. You know what I'm saying? So, like, so I thought 6 months, but who am I? Like, I'm nobody. Like, I obviously was a fool, because I would tell you it takes way longer than that to an alcohol brand. But, yeah, so that's kind of how I bankrolled the first one through itself, right? And that's how we did that. Now for War Bevco, I raised money, so that's a whole separate kind of, you know, situation. So we can get into that as well if you want to.
Oh, for sure, we want to talk about that. But right before we go on, like the Airbnb business that you had, that business is asset light because you're renting out the apartments. I could see how you started that, without a lot of money to jump into the business. You don't need to build a brand. You just need to have the apartments, and you could scale up slowly, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, the alcohol business you got into, as you said, there's a lot higher barriers to entry. There's a lot of competition. You're going up against a lot of the big brands. Two things. I mean, I get why you got out of the Airbnb. What made you switch to then the alcohol? Was it just like a passion for the alcohol business, or was there an opening in the market that you saw?
Yeah, well, I think for me personally, I've always just been interested in the alcohol business at large. When I was in the military, when I got out, one of the jobs that I thought I wanted to do is to go be like a brand manager at SoCo and work at Brown-Forman. So I was already kind of looking in the alcohol industry as an industry of interest for myself for years. When I invested in the brewery in Atlanta, that's what made it more real, right? Because then all of a sudden I have like an actual investment in the alcohol industry. And so I was able to really look over my partner's shoulders while we built out the brewery. The main husband and wife couple are two good friends of mine who run the business, and they were kind enough to, let me really kind of shadow them while we did everything to set up the first brewery. And so from there, that's how I started to learn about the business at large. Beer, wine, and spirits are like the breakdown inside of the industry, and they each are very different. I started out on the beer side of things, and then I switched over to the spirit side of things. The reason why I went to the spirit side of things, when I went to Oaxaca, Mexico for the first time, my company was in contract talks with a brewery in Mobile, Alabama, right? They wanted $2 million for the brewery. I didn't think that, that's about right, but we were going to have to do a lot to that brewery still. So it was going to be like a $4 million project, and these guys wanted $2 million, but really they should not really get paid much. They should get paid like $500,000. But they had debts and blah, blah, blah. So I was kind of shaky about that deal because I was like, I don't know, man. I might just take $2 million and build my own, build a new one, right? Instead of paying double because this is already standing here. And my plan with that brewery was to change it into two things. It was a big place. So one side I was going to put like a seltzer kind of thing because Mobile is down by the beach and do like a southern seltzer company. And like that was when the seltzers were on their rise, like in 2020. They're quick and easy to make. And then have like a dive bar that's like Battle Brewing, which is like more like a military themed situation. There's like a naval base and stuff down there. So we were going to do a two concept, two company like site situation. Anyways, I went to Oaxaca. Fell in love with the place. It was super amazing as soon as I got there. Really just so much art, so much culture, so much beautiful stuff down there. And that's when I learned about the wider world of Mezcal, right? So I'll take an aside to talk about this real quick. So, in the craft brew industry has like exploded over the past couple of years. And, now we have IPAs, double IPAs, imperial IPAs, and, all these different types of beers. And a lot of people come into the brewery and want to sit down and have flights of the beers and taste, the different offerings that we have. So in Mezcal today, Mezcal can be made from 37 different agaves. Or actually, let me just give you this little minute, breakdown. Okay, tequila is made from the Blue Weber agave, only from Jalisco, and it only has to be 51% agave, and it can have a bunch of other stuff in it to make it taste however they want. Mezcal can be made from 37 different agaves from 9 different places in Mexico. And each of those agaves, you can think about the agave like the apple. That, the Granny Smith, the Red Delicious, and the Fuji apple all taste totally different. I mean, if we make cider out of those apples, the resulting cider would be completely different as well. Sense. The same thing is true for the mezcals with the agaves. Each agave has a very different flavor when made into mezcal. So for me, coming from the craft beer industry, I'm like, man, mezcal is huge on the rise in the United States, but like none of these brands has bothered to tell me the story that I just told you.
Yeah.
Right? So no one has offered me this variety in the flavors and the different, expressions of mezcal. They're all selling just one of the 37 plants, which is called Espadín, because it's the easiest to grow and like fastest to market. And that's what everybody is understanding as mezcal right now. And so I really feel like there was a huge opportunity to introduce more Americans and more people to the wider world of mezcal and introduce people to mezcal as a category rather than as a singular spirit. You know what I'm saying? Like tequila is like a singular spirit. Yeah. Like it's made from one plant a bunch of different ways. But this is, very different. And so I've really found an opportunity, I felt like, to express that. And hold on for some product placement here.
Here you go.
Right? Yeah, so we went with different colors to represent the different agaves. Right? So you can see them right there on the front. And so one of the things so that's how I got into the mezcal business in particular. So always interested in the alcohol industry. High barriers to entry, but once you're in the industry, I think that it's not as bad as people think. But I think it's a lot of work to get into the industry, to get solidified. And I think, though, once you're operating and have been on sale for more than 3 years, if you survive 3 years, that you can survive pretty much forever. And the reason why, and I wanted to talk about this, the reason why is because the business model of alcohol is different than how I think that consumers can understand. First of all, it's a supply-side business rather than a demand-driven business, right? It's supply-side because there's so much regulation on the industry that you as a consumer only get to pick from what's available.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, even if you are jumping up and down screaming for something, like, it doesn't really matter because there's, like, 10 people who have to agree to bring that to you before, right? So even if you go into a bar right now and you like come in and you bring a bottle of Mamma Mia and you're like, hey, can I have this? They're gonna be like, we don't have that, but we have something that's like similar to it, right? Yeah. Now, if that bar then wants to then call my distributor and find out like if they can order some, maybe they will, maybe they won't, but maybe it takes 10, 20 consumers to come in to do that, whereas I can just send my salesperson into that bar and convince them to put it on their shelf. And now I had to talk to one person instead of getting 20 people to come in and say they want the product, right? So that's not how, right? So in that, so that's pretty much how it works. So supply side, and then the other thing about it is that, it's just If we don't have it, then we don't have it, right? And so it's really trying to make sure that you can have the product on demand as you need it.
So when you got into this business, here's my first thoughts. Like as a complete novice, I know absolutely nothing about the alcohol business. Outside of actually, our last conversation was the most I've ever heard. I've never even considered it as an investment or anything, even in the public market. So I'm a complete novice. But if you told me as a novice, hey, I'm going to open a tequila company or a mezcal company, my first thought is, well, how would I get onto the shelves? How am I going to get onto the shelves of the supermarket? Is that something you're even worried about? And if you aren't worried about it, does it matter that there's other competitors that have big brands already, like that are producing mezcal? I'm not sure which ones are producing mezcal, but I'm sure they are.
So what I often, so a couple of things. First of all, competition, I think, is, we're so used to thinking about it at our level, right, about, like, direct competition, right? Like, I fight you, right? So there's got to be a winner in this situation when we think about competition. I think that in our industry, it's less competition, right? And it's more about providing an appropriate amount of variety and options for the consumer. As I've said, like, okay, so let me give you some more color on this. When you walk into a liquor store right now, it seems like there's 400 companies in here. There's like so many different options for so many different spirits, right? But once you peel back the layers in the industry, you realize that just like the grocery store and other places, there's really 20 companies who own all of these brands.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example. Diageo is the biggest beverage conglomerate in the world, and let me give you a list of some of its brands. They own Casamigos, they own Tanqueray Gin, they own Captain Morgan, they own Smirnoff, they own Bullet Bourbon, they own Guinness, they own Johnny Walker, right? So right there, I've named 10 of the biggest alcohol brands in the world, but they're all owned by the same person.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason why that matters is because each time Diageo decides to invest in another brand, let's say that they invest, let's say 4 years from now they buy my brand from me. Every single place that all of those brands are is an account that they have.
Yeah.
Right? So immediately they could turn around tomorrow and tell their sales rep to go into the place, all their accounts, and say like, hey, tell everybody we're going to give them a free case of Malamia for like once a month for the rest of the year. But we want them to like plug it and like put it in cocktails or whatever. We're going to get a half off, whatever. Because they already have so many accounts for all their other alcohols, it's like an immediate situation. But down here at our level, that's not really a problem because that's a serious competition, right? You're not going to... Johnny Walker's been here for 85 years.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So is Johnny Walker my competition? No, bro. Come on. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the rookies are not LeBron's competition.
Yeah.
They play against each other, but it's not the same level of understanding. It's different, right? So understanding that, it's that, like, you have to just say, okay, the best rookies, though, do like this, though. Like, this is the metric for a great rookie. A first year out success is like this many cases.
Yeah.
And then from years 2 to 4, it's like this many cases. And then from 4 to 8, it's like this many. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be able to understand that all of this stuff, these other brands, they did all of these steps as well, right? Yeah. So before anybody heard about Casamigos and the George Clooney deal, they were a company for 7 years before that.
Yeah.
They were in the marketplace for 7 years before that, and it sold maybe like 60,000 cases in that total 7 years. Well, they sold like 400,000 cases last year.
Yeah.
So that's like 8 times as much as they were able to sell by themselves in 7 years. But because they're a Diageo brand now, they are able to expand that growth. So the pressure is not on me to sell 400,000 cases of Malamia because in our industry, it's obvious why you're not going to do that. So the pressure is a lot lower. I just have to do what is considered to be a lot of cases for a company that is like a individual company like mine, right? Like they're like, oh man, like if we sell 10,000 cases next year, I'm super rookie of the year. everybody in the industry is going to give me a phone call and want to buy a certain portion of my brand because they're like, hey, how could you start from nothing and have no distribution network and then all of a sudden you built a distribution network to sell this many cases? That means that people really like your product, which means that if we buy your product and put it into our distribution network that we have, the sky's the limit, right? Because you've already done the work to prove that the people like it. So, I say all that to say, the answer to the supermarket question is that there are two different types of clients for us. There's on-premise clients, which are like bars and restaurants, and there's off-premise clients, which are like the liquor stores or like e-commerce or things like that, right? Each brand has its, like, if you're smart in the alcohol brand, you'll go and look at like what's missing in the marketplace. So my brand, Mala Mia, what was missing in the marketplace is like currently there is not a premium or luxury mezcal brand, right? Like when you go to the store to go get mezcal, it goes from like the cheap end of like $25 or like on the maximum you can get the Casamigos mezcal is like $72. But there's not like $100 mezcal or like $120 mezcal or $150 mezcal, right? We go from $72 and then the next mezcal up is like Clase Azul's mezcal, which is like $699 and $999. So there's this huge graveyard basically between $74 and $700. And I was like, well, and I discovered all the different, types of mezcal. So I'm like, all right, well, perfect. There we go. We're going to make a brand that starts about $75 and has layered up these different, more expensive mezcals. And, the rarity is why they are the different pricing because we only have so much supply of them, right? So that makes sense. The most expensive, we can get, XYZ amount of bottles a year. So that's just what we have. And so through that way is the way that you do it. And when you're smaller, the problem is you've got to be able to keep up with demand, though. You've got to be able to grow your demand, but also keep up with your demand. And I have a product that's, handmade, right? So, even each of the bottles are allotted by hand, sealed by hand, right? So we are limited in our production capacity of how much we can get out. And so that's why it's so much more supply side. So what happens is we have to design things to go to each of those kind of clients and appeal to them. So the off-premise clients, the liquor stores, we come through and we have like this. We have like the gift boxes. Yeah. Right? So we go to the liquor store, we're like, hey, we've got these super nice, well, it has like a nice little plush cushion usually, but we go to the liquor stores, we're like, hey, for the holidays, we have these little 200 milliliters we're going to be selling in 3 variety packs for the holiday season, right? So we go to the liquor stores, we're like, hey, people are loving to gift mezcal to their favorite uncle, cousin, brother, sister that loves mezcal, blah, blah, blah. We have these introductory 3-pack variety packs at $80 that we think will be great. Here. And they're like, all right, cool, right? So that makes sense to them. They're like, oh, it's the holiday season, this is a variety pack box, that's true, mezcal's on the up and up, boom, boom, boom. Versus on-premise, we have to convince them that, okay, if you're going to pay for this little bit more expensive mezcal, right now people are really just ordering mezcal and drinking it straight, but we're trying to encourage some of these high-end cocktail bars and fine dining to put some of these other mezcals and cocktails as well. So it's about education piece. So all of those things are necessary to drive the sales and growth and marketing and everything for the brand. And so I like to think about those opportunities not as competition, but that's the game. That's where the reps are had. The reps are had doing tastings at the liquor store. The reps are had, going to the club and doing a takeover or, doing a venue, getting an event, getting a lineup of dope DJs to come and just have our free liquor there for awareness and understanding.
So there's one thought that was running through my mind while I was listening to you, and I really liked the fact that you really structured how you want to build the business. But one worry I would have, let's say if I was an investor, and I wanted to see what you would think about this, is I don't know what the margins are on each mezcal bottle. But let's say it does take 3 to 4 or 5 years before another big company comes in is the 10,000 orders give you enough cash flow to survive? Or are you going to consistently outside capital to keep growing and trying to build?
You're gonna need so the money that you make off of the bottles is enough to survive, but mainly depending on how fast you're trying to grow, what the growth strategy is, it's highly unlikely that your growth money is gonna be organic no matter what business that you're in.
Yeah.
Right? Because, so to say this like this, I might take, our minimum investment was $20,000, right?
Yeah.
I just sent like 114 cases, like 36 cases. So or 400 cases, right? So I've got to sell like 50 cases, let's say, to make $20,000. But I could just get $20,000 from you immediately.
Yeah.
Right? So like it's all about this. It's all about speed.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, maybe we're selling 50 cases a day. Well, if we're selling 50 cases a day, no problem. But if we're selling 50 cases a month, that's fine. We're doing well, but like I could go get $20,000 from one person for one conversation for 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the thing about raising money, is that the money is faster sometimes than you can. It's not that you're not going to make the money, but like maybe we need money right now.
Yeah.
Right? And like this other $20,000 is going to trickle in through the month, but we've got bills to pay on the 15th and we got to pay them.
Yeah. I understand.
So, or let's say I think it takes about $400,000 for each city that we're going to want to go into, like when we move past New York, right? For the marketing budget, for everything, right? So it's going to be more prudent. So right now our plan is like we're in New York first, and we're trying to sell our first $2 million in revenue. And that's our goal, because we think we can get through that. And then also because that puts us at a valuation that we feel comfortable with to go and start doing our Series A investing, right? Because right now I'm pre-revenue, so the VCs, they kind of want to push around a little bit. They're like, you don't have sales, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But we don't have sales because we're not on sale.
Yeah.
Right? Not because we're not selling. Like, so that's not really a real
metric,
comment.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's not really a real metric. I haven't sold to anybody, but not because no one's buying it, because I haven't availed it yet.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of hoops that we have to go through. So let's say we get our $2 million, then we're going to be able to go, and in the alcohol industry, the valuations are generally between 15 and 19 times gross revenue, right? So what that means is at $2 million, we could argue for a $30 million valuation from the VCs. So then if I'm trying to go and sell 20% of my company, I can go raise $6 million, right, on a $30 million valuation, or we could do $6 million on a $36 million valuation. And there you go, right? So I'm going to sell those guys 20% for their $6 million. Now with $6 million at $400,000 per city, we can go and now expand to 8 cities at once.
I understand.
Right? Like we did $2 million in revenue in 1 year, but now we can go take $6 million and we can replicate. So we did $2 million in one city. Now we can take $6 million and go to like 10 cities. Right?
Yeah.
And now if they each do $2 million, now we're at $20 million. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you always need that kind of outside capital. So it's not really about saving the company. It's about pushing the growth forward.
Yeah.
So it's a push pull between the revenue and the fundraising situation. They kind of go together. And what you hope though is that you won't have to take investor money and sell equity. What your hope is, the other way we could do this is go get the money from a bank. Hey, we got $2 million in revenue. We've got $1 million sitting in the bank right now, but we need $4 million to go do this growth plan and blah, 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 blah. And then they're going to be like, okay, cool. And they'll give you the $4 million. So that's the other way. Yeah. But outside capital for growth is a necessary evil.
Yeah. Do you think, is there any benefit to maybe, I'm just spitballing here again, is there any benefit to like growing the brand in New York, building it to the point it's a profitable business in New York, smaller, then moving to the next stage? Or do you believe to get into this market, you need to expand quickly? It's time.
No, it just depends on it all depends on what your ultimate goals are, right? What's your defined outcome? For us in particular, for Mala Mia, we are building this particular brand to be an acquisition brand with a timeline between 4 to 6 years from now.
Okay.
So the thing about that is when you're doing an acquisition situation, it's 15 15 to 19 times your gross revenue.
Yeah.
So you want to make more money, right?
Yeah.
You're not really worried about your profit margins as much as you usually would, because that's not what you're getting bought on, right?
Yeah.
Like no one's like stressing your EBITDA and like stressing your financials, because their attitude about it is, if you yourself in your small operation can sell $2 million worth of this product,
we'll sell
at whatever margin,
we'll sell
we can sell way more than you.
Yeah.
At 100 million at a way better margin than you.
Yeah.
So that's why they're not even judging your margin, because like it doesn't matter to them, because they're not really buying your business. They're buying access to all the intellectual property and the stuff for your brand. So with that in mind, it's very important to understand that most of the money for us wants to be spent on enriching the brand and the marketing and the bottles and like the packaging, always making sure that we're spending top dollar so that our branding and our best foot is put forward there, and worrying a little bit less about kind of some of the more backside stuff like our warehouses and different things like that, understanding that like, hey, we just need to do whatever is the most expedient, because like this isn't what anybody's like buying from us.
Yeah. The big
right?
brand.
So like we lease our warehouse, we lease these other things because like we're not going to be selling a warehouse to anybody under this business model, right? So let me say this real quick about the brands. I want you to think about alcohol brands as a subscription model, right? Because this is how it happens. Let's say we go into insert top Mexican restaurant in New York City, right? And we convince them that like, hey man, like Mamma Mia is a new wave, blah, blah, blah. We'll give you half off for a year if you run this like cocktail rider in your cocktail menu. It says Mamma Mia, blah, blah, there's these 3 cocktails, right? So let's say they start running it. We do a couple events. People start loving it. People come out on their sides about what their favorite cocktail is. And all of a sudden, now, Friday and Saturday, people are coming in. They're doing a lot of volume of the Mamma Mia drinks, right? Maybe at first they were doing 5 cases a week. Now they're doing 10 cases a week. Maybe they're doing up to 20 cases a week, right? That's one account, 20 cases a week. That's 80 cases a month to one account. If we get 10 accounts and they're doing the same thing, that's 800 cases a month.
Yeah.
Right? So that's 10 accounts, 800 cases a month. We got 12 months in the year, right? So they're running through it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then what happens is it's a subscription business for them too, because they've been running the rider and then people have been drinking the drinks and they go back there to get that drink because that's their drink now.
One thing feeds into the other as well.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying about if you survive in the alcohol industry for 3 years, you're going to be good because you've got subscribers now.
That actually is a great way to put it, is a subscription model. And
it is a subscription model.
So, Devin, we went over our time, but I would love everything we said here.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's how you saw it all. I loved it. It was perfect. One of the better episodes I've had here. Super. I learned so much about the alcohol industry. I'm going to try to recommend this all over Twitter to anyone that is in the alcohol industry. I think that someone that wants to invest in the alcohol industry. I might even look up a few alcohol industry companies as we're talking about it now.
Let me know. Hey, we're still fundraising too. Anybody out there?
Hey, no, that's what it is. Man, I appreciate it. Actually, I got one quick question. If you can answer it really quick, we'll wrap it up. Something I was thinking about. Has your military experience helped you in business at all? That's something I've always been curious about.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot from a few ways. The first way is that it gave me a really good strategic planning structure. As an officer, I did a lot of strategic planning. So, like, I think one of the things, like, I'm about to open a business consulting business, actually, about this, where helping entrepreneurs really sit down and, like, map out the steps that are needed. There's, like, 800, 1,000 steps to do your business, but we can get all those steps done, but we need to start. You need somebody sometimes to guide you about, like, what's step 1 through 100, what's 100 to 200, and kind of getting those priorities of work down. So that was really helpful. The other thing that was really helpful is just the pure discipline of just like, man, getting up and doing stuff and just understanding that every mission is made up of its like component parts that need to be done in order to like set off all the things, and like that's it. And so it's not going to work if you don't do the inputs that are necessary to make the machine go, you know? And I think that always gives me a lot of calm in business, because I can just sit back and assess, like, hey, do we have all the inputs that are needed for this thing? Okay, no. Well, where are we going to get them from? Okay, like, let's, like, right? So it takes all of the pressure of me being like a genius or me being right about everything, and it just makes it a problem where it's just like, this information is available, so like let's go find it. It doesn't mean I have to have it. We just need to go get it if I don't have it. So I think those ways it's been really helpful.
Man, this has been an excellent show. Thank you so much, and you took over the show. It was great. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate
you. And really thank you for your time. And guys, check it out. You guys see his company is going to be growing. We're going to share it on our Instagram. I've seen you guys have an Instagram channel. I'll share it. You guys go follow and wait for it to come out in New York City and all over the U.S.
We'll be there soon.
All right, my man.
Our stuff's supposed to land in the warehouse today, so I'm excited.
All right, let's do it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Ciao.